back to Let's Play number 2, or Let's Cast number 2, darn it. More serious about this stuff. So, first off, we're going to play, today we're going to play Turbo Pug, because this is the third time I've tried to do this video, and the first time I spent like half an hour trying to get my Dreamcast set up so I could properly use it with my software, and I didn't realize Alice's Mom's Rescue hadn't saved my game, so I couldn't do that. Then I started recording with this game, and the microphone was like super quiet, and the game was really loud, which is why I'm turning. It was all the way at 100 when I first started, and I turned it to 70, and it was still too loud. So now I'm just turning it down to like 20, so it's just barely in the background. So this is run number time number 3. Now Turbo Pug is an endless runner type game on Steam, and I don't think it's on iOS or Android. And you play as, well, you play as one of you play as either as one of these characters, which I've only unlocked 8 of. I usually play as the Space Cat, even though it's Turbo Pug. It doesn't actually like give you like names for them, which is kind of sad, because it'd be funny to see cute names for these pugs. We'll play as Space Pug, or Christmas Pug, I should say. And each one actually plays differently, surprisingly enough. So I mean it's a relatively inexpensive game, but okay, I'm gonna go back to Mooncat because I'm best with Mooncat. Because Mooncat can like float and double jump. So let's start off this time with what I actually started off with the last time, in a continuation of the thing that I talked about way too much on the first Let's Cast. The Coleco Chameleon is officially dead. Coleco the day that I recorded it 2 weeks ago, Coleco had asked, or had demanded, to see a working prototype within like a week. Well, that didn't happen, and within like a couple days after that happening, the Retro VGS people pulled their Facebook page and pulled their website completely down. Like, if you went to Retro VGS's website, you got nothing. And then I think Coleco posted that they had received communication that the project was canceled or whatever. So essentially, it was all kind of bunk. But let's not look at this badly upon Coleco, because I mean Coleco did their due diligence. They realized they were like, oh hey, our name's being dragged for this thing that may or may not actually be a scam. And they were like, okay, well, you have to give us some sort of prototype right now in order for us to, well, effectively right now, in order for us to let you keep using our name. So and I mean, it seems like the holding company, because it's still not actually original Coleco from the 80s, it never will be, and whatever. Looks like they're trying to do something with the brand. Like, they're trying to remake those old handheld mini arcades that were really popular in like the 80s, that were kind of like the Tiger Electronics type thing, except much better and not as cheap. they're trying to bring those back, hopefully with better components, because 20 plus years. So, yeah, good for them. So yeah, that's I think finally it for the Coleco Chameleon / Retro VGS. I still want to believe that Mike Kennedy and company were just in over their heads and they weren't completely trying to scam people. But the more evidence that comes up, the worse it looks for them. Apparently, how they bought their molds for the Jaguar molds, which was like the one thing they actually did have. Because I'm gonna talk like 20 minutes about the damn Coleco Chameleon again. Because the guy who ran it, Mike Kennedy, also runs 2 other retro related things. Retro Magazine, which is a magazine, and Game Gabble, which is kind of like eBay for just video games instead of eBay, which is for everything. I've never actually used Game Gabble, to be honest, but I have used eBay, and I think I have a retro magazine. I'm not sure if it's that one or if it's a different retro magazine, but apparently he really had these interesting ways of shuffling the money around. The molds were technically legally bought by, I think it was Game Gabble, and then the profits for the mold from Atari shell resales, because I think they've been doing that, or if they haven't, they should, because a lot of people would like Atari, the clear, cool Atari shells. Those sales, I think, went to the magazine, and then the Retro VGS had to pay for all advertising themselves instead of getting a discount or free, since it's run by the same people. So yeah, it was kind of sketchy, and I'm not exactly sure how precisely it all worked. There's a video that I saw that showed this all to me, and I'll link that in the YouTube description. If you're just listening to the podcast, sorry, I can't really help you, because I don't really know how to link in podcast descriptions. I'm new to this. I've been doing YouTube videos for almost 3 years now. The podcast I've been doing for less than a month. Okay, so I think that is finally it for the Coleco Chameleon Retro VGS, unless it comes back as the Tiger Electronics Lynx or something stupid like that. So yeah, okay. Some interesting VR related news. Sony announced the PlayStation VR's name, or official name, or price, and all that fun stuff. And Oculus also released the launch lineup for the Rift. So that's interesting. I'm still kind of on the fence about VR in general, especially if every one turns into its own little stupid walled garden. But if it's easy enough to port games from one setup to another, I think it'll probably work out all right. But if you're gonna force people to buy each different one in order to use different softwares, you're gonna have an issue. So, I mean, I'm not expecting like the Killzone VR game or whatever the hell it ends up being called to work on an Oculus Rift, but something like, say, EVE Online, or what's that other space? That's another space shooter game that's coming out soon. Whatever, I can't remember the name of it. Like that, if those you have to either have one or the other to use, it's probably not going to work out that well because they're like $400 to $600 a piece. Nobody's going to pay $400 for the PSVR, $600 for the HTC Vive, $600 for the Oculus Rift. Nobody's going to pay like $1,600 so that they can play a handful of games in VR. It's going to come down to the software. Whether or not there's enough quality software that makes people think, oh yeah, I will totally buy this extra $600 piece of equipment for my computer or PlayStation. Oh, there's only one other piece of news that actually came out after I had recorded the first attempt at this podcast, or the second attempt at this podcast. Relatively well-known YouTuber, Jim Sterling, who does the Jimquisition, basically where he talks about how Konami is idiots and bad games are bad and all that kind of stuff, is getting sued by the developers of a great number of games that he apparently has disdain for, called Digital Homicide. They're from Arizona, and they're suing him for 10 counts of libel. They're probably not going to win because America has pretty strong libel laws, and really, the Digital Homicide people are going to have to prove that Jim intended to defame them, or that not that he intended to defame them, that he intended to mislead people when he wrote something, or he either wrote something or said something, because he also runs a blog. Like, I run a blog, but my blog doesn't upset people because nobody really reads it. So yeah, in the UK they might have an issue. What's interesting is I'd always thought that he was British because he seems to talk with a British accent. Apparently he lives in Mississippi, which makes him like the only person with a British accent in Mississippi, and I just drowned my cat. And if you're listening to the podcast, remember I'm playing Turbo Pug, which is a video game where you eventually die in some manner while playing as a cat or a pug. I'm not actually killing animals. I should point that out because I don't want PETA to sue me. Though I don't think PETA could sue me, but still, I wouldn't be surprised because they're kind of stupid. So, most of I read through the filing from, where was it? I think Destructoid posted it. Yeah, Destructoid, I want to say. They posted it, and I read through it. And most of the counts of libel are related to, one, Jim saying that they were pretending to be a Polish game studio called ECC Games, because they had started calling themselves that, even though the other company was around first. And that was like 3 or 4 of the counts were related to that. And then another like 2 or 3 were related to apparently for the art for one of their games, not the Slaughtering Grounds, which is their most infamous game. But for one of their games, I don't really remember or care which, they had used a piece of art that someone made on DeviantArt, And Jim called them on it, even though they had apparently purchased the rights to use that artwork from Shutterstock. Because the artist put it up on Shutterstock because, hey, you know what, make a few bucks off it, whatever. It's a nice picture, I've seen it. So there were like 2 more of the accounts were related to that. And okay, I mean, he did later on amend his blog post to point out that it may have been purchased from Shutterstock, and they claim to have a okay, I'm just gonna keep getting stronger in this game. They said they have a receipt for it, so they apparently did legally purchase it. Whatever. Does this have any chance in hell of succeeding? No. Because, let's be completely honest, I mean, the way that Jim wrote it and said it, for most of the explicit things that they are complaining about, were... He wrote them in a way so that it does not necessarily mean that he's distributing it as complete fact, if that makes any sense. It really doesn't, actually. Even the way I said it doesn't make any sense. Basically, as I said earlier, in America, the digital homicide people are going to have to prove that when he said all these things, he deliberately lied or misinformed. He deliberately misinformed his audience for the purpose of slandering the company or the plaintiff. Unless they can find some way that actually unless they can find some evidence that says that he knew that they were a completely different company, or that he knew that they purchased the picture off Shutterstock and just deliberately removed that information, they're not going to win this case, which is good. They also don't have a lawyer. And in one of the more interesting things regarding this case, when I think it was the person who wrote the article from Destructoid, when they contacted the digital homicide people about the case, because that's what you do when you're a journalist, the digital homicide person forwarded them an entire email chain or an email conversation that they had with as the person from Destructoid said, a different publication. Someone from Kotaku wrote that it might have been them, but since neither outlet explicitly referenced the other, it could have been a completely different conversation thread. But the person from Kotaku said that someone contacted him and said that the digital homicide people used his email and forwarded his email to them, to the Destructoid writer, or to the other writer, I should say. And the Destructoid writer said that they were forwarded someone's email conversation. It could have been the Kotaku person. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter. It just seems really strange for them to do that. Nonetheless, it would be hilarious if this actually was a digital homicide game and I decided to play it before finding out this information. I suppose I should look into that. Is this a digital homicide game? I'll probably add that later on in the picture. I don't know what I'm going to do with the podcast, but yeah. Okay. So that's really it for the news stories that I could think of or really cared. Oh, except for Sony or Microsoft wants to do cross-platform play with the PS4 and the PC for Rocket League. That would be cool if Sony played along, but Sony really has no incentive at the moment to play along except to not look like dicks. I would like it because right now, finding somebody to play in Rocket League probably isn't that difficult. I still haven't bought that game yet. I can pretty much guarantee that, like, a year or so down the line, it's going to be almost impossible to find players, because a lot of people are going to have migrated over to whatever the new game is. So as someone who's spent a lot of time in a game server, you know, the best way, any way that you can increase the number of potential players online is a good thing for me. As I said, Sony really doesn't have any massive incentive except the fact that Microsoft wants to do it, and they're the only ones who can stop them from doing something that's really is mutually beneficial for everyone. Because let's be honest, nobody's really buying a PS4 over a Xbox One specifically for Rocket League. Now, I mean, some people are like, "Oh yeah, I want to play my friends in Rocket League, but I only have it on the PC, and they have it on the PS4 or whatever." Actually, the PS4 and PC, but still, that's, as I said, I'd really like for Sony to play ball with them on this, but they really have no huge incentive to do so. But it seems like the people who made Rocket League are down for that too. And they also, both systems have cross-platform play with the PC already. So it would be cross-platform with all three. Not the Wii U, because I don't think it's on the Wii U. Plus, Nintendo seems to still think internet is a fad. The 6th generation really killed Nintendo's internet because they fell way behind, and even now they haven't really caught up. I mean, you could say that PSN is about as good as Xbox, except for the fact that it seems to be down more often. Or Xbox Live, I should say. But nobody's really saying that the Nintendo network is as good as either one. And they really aren't. I don't have a PS4 yet, but I do have an Xbox One and a Wii U. And if I'm playing an online type thing, I'll usually just do it on my Xbox. Plus, of course, most of these games haven't been released on the Wii U. Because the Wii U is doing and Nintendo's console is doing its thing where it only gets like exclusive games and like 4 or 5 multiplats. A lot of games are actually being ported from the Wii U to other consoles, like Shovel Knight. Okay, so that's finally it for the news that's relatively new. Of course, if you're coming to me for news, you're probably going to have a bad time, because I only do these podcasts every other week. And I spend about half the time talking about whichever game I'm playing. I'm probably going to die less in this than I did in Alice's Mom's Rescue 2 weeks ago. Ugh, I can't get this area to work in a way that doesn't make me die. Pug points. Pug points. There was one other thing I did want to talk about, and I'm probably going to end this video relatively early because I can't talk about the Coleco Chameleon for a half hour again today. Just can't. Relatively recently, this was actually before the last podcast, but I just didn't think about it because I had a lot of other things to talk about. Sega sent out a survey for, people who play Sega games. And as my extensive Dreamcast collection would let you know, not complete, but I have over like 125 Dreamcast games at the moment. As my Dreamcast collection and the fact that I've had a Genesis for the same Genesis for 20 years now, will have you believe I'm relatively a Sega fanboy. So it starts off like talking about which game systems do you have? and it was a massive list. Like it had a list. It had like the Wonder Swan on there, and like the Neo Geo Pocket and the Pocket Color, and I'm just like, wow, this is an extensive list. Because I mean, I've done video game related surveys before, and usually it's like, do you have an Xbox? And like, if it goes past before it even, if it has the Dreamcast, I'm surprised. But no, man, Sega, they put out all the stops. They had the Atari Jaguar on there, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, I had like over half of the systems there because I have a lot of video game systems. And then it's like, which of these Sega franchises have you heard of? And I selected pretty much all of them because I've heard of pretty much all of them. And then it was like, oh, what do you like about this franchise? And that specific page took like 20 minutes because I had to write in at least a sentence or two about like 40 different franchises, because Sega has a ton of franchises and most of them haven't gotten a game in years. So I'm like, it was like, you know, for Phantasy Star Online, what do you like about it? And I'm like, you know what, just bring Phantasy Star Online to the West. That's what I want you to do. Just do it. Phantasy Star Online 2, I should say. No. Because Phantasy Star Online 2 has been out in Japan for 2 or 3 at least years. And they've always been like, yeah, we'll release it stateside. Nope. They still haven't. Now they're actually locking out players who are playing from the US, from the West. So you have to get like a proxy in order to even play it, and the English patch, because it hasn't been released in English. So I'm just like, just bring it to the West, for crying out loud. You have enough people who are willing to go through all these hoops, and you don't think they'll pay $15 a month for it too? Or however much they want you to pay for it? And then for Shenmue, I was like, just remake Shenmue 1 and 2 in HD. I was really hoping that Sega's Dreamcast collection would involve more than like 4 games, including one that wasn't even released in the US on the Dreamcast, and 2 would spawn more Dreamcast collections, because I'd love to see new versions of versions of a lot of Dreamcast games. Because I mean, some have been re-released, like Jet Set / Jet Grind Radio has been re-released in the US on Steam and PSN and Xbox Live, I think. But there's a lot of other games that just haven't seen a new release, like Headhunter. I'd like to see that. What other Dreamcast games can I think of that haven't been released at all? Okay, I can't really think of any offhand. Sonic Shuffle would be interesting, but plus I'm actually literally playing, so I can't turn my head and look at. Okay, there we are. I mean, there's a ton of really great Dreamcast games. The Dreamcast had a phenomenal library, actually. Much better than its numbers would suggest. But Sega hasn't even thought about bringing Shenmue 1 and 2 into HD, and I've said it before, and I said it yesterday, and I'll say it again. Bringing Shenmue, or re-releasing Shenmue 1 and 2 in some form, be it as a movie, as re-releases, as just straight up Dreamcast ports that you put on Steam, or anything like that, is pretty much necessary for the success of Shenmue 3. Because the first Shenmue sold like somewhere around like 500,000 to 1 million copies or whatever. I'm not 100% certain. I don't really feel like looking that up. And plus, video game numbers are like this mystical box. The second Shenmue, I don't even think sold that well. And you're expecting those people to be the only ones who are going to buy Shenmue 3, because if you don't know the story, of Shenmue 1 and 2, there's no real reason for you to get 3. Maybe I should do a let's play of all 3 of those of all of Shenmue 1 and 2, and that will be my let's cast for a few months, probably like almost a year at this point. Those are very long games. But someone who's never been able to experience the first 2 games, and a lot of people haven't, because Shenmue 2 was released like, what, 14 years ago? So that means that a lot of adults were like 4 or 5 years old back then. So, and I know Sega really doesn't have a stake in Shenmue 3, because they just gave Yu Suzuki permission to make it without their involvement, which I'll give them this much. That's a really big something that's really big to do and really good. I like that. But it's a perfect opportunity to reintroduce people to a franchise that was sorely killed off way too soon. Well, for too long. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I pre-ordered the PS4 version on Kickstarter. I don't have a PS4 yet. I'm going to buy a PS4 specifically for it because they didn't have the Xbox One version available, and I'd prefer to buy it on a console. So, yeah, I'm buying... It's a system seller, for crying out loud. So, but then after talking about all these great franchises, and I'm feeling really good and really nostalgic, it starts off with, which Sega mobile games have you played? I'm like, no, don't talk about Sonic Runners and the mediocre Crazy Taxi Temple Run knockoff you made. I don't want to talk about those. I'm feeling good now. I'm just like, and yeah, I mean, some of Sega's are game ports have actually been pretty good, and some of the new versions of the remakes of old games they've had have been good. Sonic 2 was improved actually a little bit on its predecessor. I still think the original game is the best version because it's the best game ever, but it's if you want to play it on the bus and you don't have a Sega Nomad with you, that's the best way you're gonna do it. Or you could be cool and get a Sega Nomad. Sega Nomad for cool kids only. Dying cats. Let's change to let's go with this one, whatever that is. That was a strange noise. And remember, if you're still only listening to the podcast, I'm playing Turbo Pug, which is a Steam game, which you can play on Steam. I'm not actually killing adorable dogs. Yeah, I mean, Sega has a lot of really great franchises that they've kind of just ignored in the past 5 or 10 years. Like, there hasn't been a new bare knuckle / Streets of Rage game since the Genesis Streets of Rage 3. Vector Man hasn't had a new game since Vector Man 2 on the Genesis. Both of those had canceled sequels or remakes. There hasn't been an Altered Beast game since the PS2, and that one was only released in Europe and sucked. There hasn't been a new Space Harrier. It's not counting the 3D version. Not counting the 3D version, which is pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. But There hasn't been a new Space Harrier since since Planet Harriers, which only came out in the arcades. And that was in 2000. I mean, there hasn't been a new Jet Set or Jet Set radio game since Jet Set Radio Future in 2001 or 2002. It was on the original Xbox. Now, you haven't had that. You haven't had a lot of... You haven't had a new Alex Kidd game since... I think the one that was on the Genesis. I don't think there's been a new Alex Kidd game since then. I mean, like, if you're playing Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, which is a great game and you should play it, half of the characters in the game haven't had a game come out since the 6th generation at the latest. Billy Hatcher only had one game. He's in it, or actually he has a stage. I'm not sure if he's actually in it. Ooh La La's in the game. She hasn't had a game come out since the PS2, a new game at least. Trying to think of more characters that are in the game that I haven't actually mentioned. There hasn't been. Actually, there have been a few House of the Dead. House of the Dead is one of the few franchises they've actually been kept running relatively steadily. There hasn't been a new Virtua Cop game. There hasn't been a new Virtua Fighter game since Virtua Fighter 5, Final Showdown, which yeah was on the Xbox 360 and the PS3, but still. And you think that and especially since a lot of tournaments actually still use Virtua Fighter, one of the Virtua Fighter games, you'd think that that would be a good excuse for them to like, hey, maybe we should think about making a new Virtua Fighter. Nope. We're gonna make 3 Sonic games and most of them are terrible. I love Sonic. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Sonic 2 is my favorite game of all time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can only make Sonic games forever and ever and ever and ever. Because you don't need to. You can do other things. At the very least, it's not as bad as Konami. Okay. So I've gotten off my soapbox about how Sega really needs to remember that their old franchises exist and are awesome and great and need to be brought back to life. Actually, in all these characters actually control a little bit differently, which is surprising. Given that I think this game is like $3. You wouldn't expect that from like a $3 Steam game. Okay, I'm gonna play one more round, unless I die really early this time. And then, well, I try, because I can't really think of anything else to talk about right now, and I really should probably start like making notes for these, and being like, hey, what should I talk about? But I haven't really thought, and you'd think that doing these every other week would give me plenty of stuff to talk about, but no, it hasn't. Mainly because a lot of things that are in video gaming are kind of like the same. It's like, oh, virtual reality. Yay. I'm still starting to think virtual reality might just become the new 3D TV. I don't know. I'm honestly sort of thinking about getting like one of the new Galaxy S phones and just getting the Gear VR. Even though it's not perfect virtual reality, it's a lot cheaper than $600 for an Oculus Rift. Plus, I'd need to get a new computer. Or let's see, that's probably at least $1,600 or $1,400 for the Oculus Rift, since I need to get a new computer for it. Same with the HTC Vive, because I'm probably need to get a new computer for it too. The PlayStation VR, I need to spend $1,000 because it's $600 and I need to get a PS4. Whereas, yeah, I need to buy a new phone, but I need to get a new phone anyway. Because my phone's getting at this point where it just doesn't want to recognize my SIM card every now and then. It's like, SIM card, it's just been removed. I have to turn it off right now. It's like 3 years old at this point, which is old for a smartphone. Even though my Xbox One is almost that old too. It's like 2.5. No, I've had it for. Let's see, I got it 2014. So yeah, I've had it for 2 years actually. Then again, I don't use it as often. Okay, this is the last run, and then I'm going to put this up on the internet, and people are going to be like, why are you playing as a Turbo Pug? Okay, so we'll see you next time. Next week I'm going to do a review of something, maybe one of the new Dreamcast games I just recently bought. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll be doing another one of these fantastic Let's Casts. So we'll see you then.